The year is 1943. The tide of World War II has turned with the Nazi surrender at Stalingrad, North Africa, and the invasion of Italy. It was also the year that Claude Clement Jr. received a letter from Uncle Sam stating that he had been drafted into the United States Navy. In this narrative documentary, Claude Clement Jr. will tell you about his selfless service during the experiences he had while serving during World War II. This is Claude's story.
Okay, I went to boot camp at San Diego, and that lasted 3 weeks. And then I was selected to go to radar school, and that was 3 weeks. And after radar school, they sent me to Little Creek, Virginia. That's near Norfolk. It was a staging area for assembling a crew for a ship. So we came all over the United States and went to this Little Creek amphibious training base, and they put together a ship's company. And there was about 65 people made up the personnel. And we went on this ship. We went down to Charleston, South Carolina, and picked that up. And they made over 600 of them. And they were designed as ocean going. They had a shallow draft, so it was rough. They bobbed with the water, you know. But this it would cruise at 25 knots, and we would go to a beach and open up these bow doors and discharge our equipment, which was tanks, tank retrievers, bulldozers, stuff like that. And we could go right up to the beach and let that ramp down and open the doors, let the ramp down, and that equipment would roll right off on the beach. And this was volcanic sand, and you had to have a track. Regular tires on a vehicle would not stand up. You either had to have a track vehicle or have a overlay for regular rubber tires too. But that whole island was that way, and that made it difficult. Okay, this was the conning tower. That's where the officers stood when we were underway and in battle. Radarman was right in here, in this conning tower. The radarman, radioman, and the helmsman were right in here. And signalman worked out of this, and they had all your flag displays and everything. Well, this was open, and for instance, we went into the beach and we had a load of rolling vehicles, and they called us in. Lunchtime, beach docking time was 9 o'clock. And we went in at 11. And we let off one tank. And that was it. And Marines were up walking around everywhere. Some of them were trying to fake injury and would try to get back on your ship, but the officers, armed officers, were there to keep them from going back, you know. Well, the Japs withheld fire for 3 hours, did not return a shot. And there we had been bombarding and blasting it for 2 or 3 weeks. And we sent all these troops in, and they did not reach any resistance for 3 hours. But that island was kind of shaped like a pork chop. And on one end there was a volcano. And it was still, it had been active fairly recently. But it came from a point and widened out just like a pork chop. And all this, I think the highest elevation was about 20 feet. Well, it was rock, and they had all of that rocky area had built underground caves and reinforced pillboxes and everything, and they were just sitting there watching us till they decided to retaliate, and then it was holy slaughter for several days. We went back, we went in at 10 o'clock, didn't see anything, and we went in at about 5 o'clock, and we got hit with some kind of shell, and it knocked the whole, probably a 10 by 10 in the, well, it hit right over here, right about the water line, and blew a hole in there. And we had a boy that lost a foot. He was right there, and there was several people in here that got shrapnel wounds and 2 or 3 shell shock deals. So we had about 8 or 10 casualties during that second deal. And then we, of course, we were kind of disabled, but we were still able to haul cargo in and out. We would go to a bigger ship that couldn't go ashore, and we would haul stuff back and forth. Well, one time we pulled up beside this cargo ship. You know, they got their booms hanging out and all, and it got tangled up with this right here. And we bent that all out of shape, and but we stayed there till about June. And that was about the time the war was over. Just transporting cargo. Otherwise, we would have been, if we had been able, we would have went on to Okinawa. But, well, we would never see them, you know. We didn't see them for 3 hours, and then they started shooting back, And the only way those pillboxes had reinforced concrete from 5 to 20 feet thick. The roof was 20 feet, and the sides and front was 5 to 10. And they just had these little holes that you could look out or poke a gun barrel through. And the only way the Americans could penetrate was throw a hand grenade in one of them slots and then go in, or put a flamethrower in there and burn them out, and then go in there and root them out. And that whole island was undermined with pillboxes. They was all underground. No sign of any Japs above ground. Our only duty was to transport men and supplies from ships to shore. And we stayed there about 4 months doing that.
So,
Because we were not fit for combat, but we could do that. I remember he was from a Midwestern state, and he was a quartermaster. You know, flag signals, and they'd run up these pennants that would give flags, and they would chart our course. But his battleship duty was to go back here and go down below and he was able to physically control the rudder and all from back here. And he was down below, he was in this area, and he went back up here to get a package of cigarettes and got hit. He was supposed to be down here. But his reaction was, well, I'm lucky. I lost a foot. I'm going to live. I'm going to be slightly disabled. And I've got a college degree paid for if I'll take advantage of it. So he had a positive attitude. In 1942, I graduated from high school. That would have been in the spring. And I'd already made plans to go to college. So I went to Fayetteville, to the Ag College, and went 1 year. And then I came home in the spring of 43, I guess, and I got what they call the farm deferment. And that went through the summer. And then in the fall of 43, they drafted me. And I went through, that was in the latter part of the year, December. And by the time I got picked up a ship and got this training, we left Charleston. Incidentally, the ship came from Charleston, and we went back up to the Potomac River and did some training around Virginia and all. And then we went down That would have been close to December. We went through the canal up to San Francisco, over to Hawaii, into all that group of islands. I think it was the Aleutians, I don't know. But you remember after the war, they dropped an A-bomb on a little old island and completely wiped it off the earth. Just test, you know. Well, it was in that group of islands that we went to. And then we went on up to Saipan and Guam. And by then we was within 2,000 miles of Japan. And they were bombing Japan with B-29s from Saipan and Guam. Well, that was a 2,000-mile one-way trip. So they had to drop their bombs and then return. 4,000 or 5,000 mile round trip, you know. So they, some of those planes would get disabled and they didn't have any place to land. So that's why they looked for an island to take for emergency landing. And that's why they chose Iwo. And so that, by then, that was, well, invasion was early February in 45, I think. And we left Guam about 5 days before that and headed for Iwo. And you never saw the mass of ships involved in that invasion. They had all the Navy and Air Force in that area concentrating on that invasion. And they had the big battleships, the cruisers, and everything from that on down. There was probably 3,000 or 4,000 ships involved. We had regular mail call, and of course everything was either by air or ship, but we could get a letter in a couple of weeks. And I had mail contact with my parents all the time. After the war, I came back home, and that would have been I think in the spring, and I think that fall I went back to school, and I stayed in school till 51. That's when I graduated, and I came back home to this house here, and was going to farm. But I had a BS in agriculture, so that qualified me for lots of jobs. Well, I had a first cousin that we always ran around together with, and we had a little old whiz 12 miles out of Jacksonville, and that was our hangout for going and getting the Coke, and they had a drive-in movie up there, and so this friend of ours, which was a woman that I had known all my life, and my first cousin was same age I was, and we grew up together, and we grew up, and we went up there one day for a Coke, and this girl friend had a girl with her. And that was this woman there. I had never seen her before. And in 3 weeks, we got married. And we lived together 72 years. She died about 3 years ago. I was, well, she was 18, and I was about 25 or 6. But she came on the farm, and then when we, a year after we got married, I took a job with Extension, and we went all over the state. I served in 4 counties. And she was kind of a self-trained stenographer, learned how to keep books, and everywhere we moved, I was able to get her a job. I know one place she was hunting a job, and the county agent had an advisory board made up of local farmers. And one of these board members was on the board of directors of this farm machinery company. And he said, they was looking for a secretary, and he had heard by rumor that the new county agent's wife was a secretary. So he hired her. So she was always able to get a pretty good job. I've always been interested in history, and I remember that the first high school subject that I really cared anything about was United States history. So I've kind of reflected on history as I went along, and made a few notes and pictures, and kind of kept up with everything. But as a county agent, we had annual meetings every year in a different state, and I would go. And county agents always worked real closely with Farm Bureau, because they represented farmers and we represented farmers. And way back in history, county agents helped organize Farm Bureau as a kind of a political group to promote farming. So we've always been real close. And they always had annual meetings somewhere in the United States. And I would go to them. Usually might be some expenses paid or something, you know. So I got to travel a lot, just belonging to these two groups. And when we took up a hobby of traveling, and before it was all over, we had visited every state in the Union, had been to Hawaii, had taken several cruises in the Pacific, went to England and France and Germany, and once or twice a year we just tried to take a trip somewhere. Well, unfortunately, as time goes on, time just causes people have lessen their interest in history. They've heard of Normandy Beach, and they've heard of Iwo, and for instance, here we've got a group of veterans, and there's about 10 of us. Well, as far as I know, out of that 10, only 2 are World War II veterans. All the rest are younger. So they kind of look on us as an old dog. It's doesn't had its day, you know. And they get together and they don't want to talk about Iwo, and they're more into Vietnam and things that have happened in recent years, you know. With the atomic age in place like it is, it's scary. Because with the A-bomb, you can wipe out a whole city. And I worry about some dictator like North Korea or somebody always raising trouble, and they can attract enough scientists to develop these things, and there's just no way to control it. So you don't know, there'll be wars again. When or where, we don't know. But they'll be tough. I think the general public needs to be, have a stronger feeling for their country and what's going on, what's happening, and just be on the constant alert for trying to keep peace, because we don't want any more war.
He is very prideful. He loves his country, he loves his family. And those are two things that as soon as you walk into his home, you see right off the bat, because his room is covered in memorabilia from war days and also his family. And so that immediately stands out to you. And he's willing to talk to you at any time about either one of those.
I take care of him on a daily basis. Our interests are flowers. We discuss flowers every day. He's given me several tips on how to take care of my rose bushes. I love the fact that he likes to make people smile. He's a very intelligent man.